from the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, winner of the Southern Oregon Television Award for Program of the Year and the Award for Best Educational Program. I'm the host and producer, John Letts. Ramping Up Your English is an educational support program for intermediate English learners. It's a program for people from all language backgrounds. Ramping Up Your English is also for people of all ages. If you've already passed the beginning stages of learning English and want to reach higher levels of proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our current thematic unit is animals. This is segment 1 of episode 49. In a previous episode, we described a black bear using a familiar animal to which to compare it, and then listed what's different about it, that animal. We added some other physical features of black bears. Today, we're going to look at 2 more bears, those being the grizzly bear and polar bears. Now watch carefully in the following video clip and start noting how these bears are different from black bears and from each other. Here's the video clip.
Peering at this grizzly bear sow, I realize this is the closest I've ever been to one of these powerful mammals. My lack of fear is explained by the presence of an electric fence between me and the bear, plus the knowledge that this grizzly bear was saved by a rehabilitation center and has lived with people for years. Still, I'm grateful for the fence. The Rehabilitation Center is Wildlife Images, located in Josephine County near the town of Merlin, Oregon. While this grizzly bear lacks nothing in size or strength, it's smaller than the Bruin, the male grizzly. Despite a smaller size, a grizzly sow is far more dangerous than a male. Grizzly sows are well known to be extremely protective of their young, their cubs. That's where most attacks on people take place, when someone comes between a sow and her cubs, or at least in her perception, too close for comfort. This sow has no cubs, so that's another reason that videographer Gary Mark Roberts and I feel relaxed videotaping her. Grizzly bears are also called brown bears. Notice the wide forehead and those huge claws. Also the long shaggy fur and the prominent hump above the shoulders. I'm a respectable distance from this grizzly bear sow in the wild. If you look closely, you can see her cub coming in and out of view a distance behind her. This is in Denali National Park in Alaska. Grizzly bears catch and eat migrating salmon when they can. This brown bear in Alaska moves toward the water's edge. It's too early for the salmon run, but it digs into the bank to get what it can. Here are more of the grizzly bear's adaptations.
They have very sharp teeth, so they can rip the meat off the fish. They have a long time indenting for their babies, and they usually give birth to twins.
Bears don't seek out people as prey. Most bear attack victims surprise a bear accidentally, or they come too close to a bear's cub. Farther north in Alaska lives the polar bear.
They live in the Arctic ice cap called tundra. They can eat up to 150 pounds of blubber a day. They have 42 teeth.
Polar bears swim so they can find new ice.
They usually go to a seal's breathing hole, and when the seal comes near, the polar bear pops up and just grabs it.
While polar bears are hit hard by climate change, grizzly bears are endangered by habitat fragmentation and loss.
So, what did you notice about grizzly bears and polar bears? Well, let's go back to the image of the black bear to start with. We compared a black bear to an impossibly large dog in our previous episode. Now we're looking at the wide, muscular rump above the hind legs. We're looking at its entire body as it moves, seeing those thick legs and massive paws. We're noting a highly oval shape. Are there any other features you remember from describing a black bear? For purposes of comparison, we'll remember the color of the bear we just saw in the video clip. It's important to note, however, that black bears can have a range of colors, from jet black to blonde. We'll use this image to contrast black bears with grizzly bears and polar bears when we return.
Namaste. I'm Kumud and I have this my cooking show. I'm doing the show since 17 years and my specialty is to use lots of vegetable, usual and unusual and grains, many kind of beans, and I teach how to make ghee, how to make yogurt, how to make raita, and I use all these beautiful spices which are really health giving. I use lots of fresh ginger and garlic and little bit of jalapeno, and to please keep attending my cooking classes. And for my book you can go through Amazon or you can buy from Co-op or Bloomsbury bookstore or from me. And for classes and more inquiry you can call my cell phone number 541-864-9620. You'll learn so many beautiful things. You'll love it, love it, love it. Attend the class. Thank you. Namaste.
Welcome back to Ramping Up Your English, where we help intermediate level English learners improve their English proficiency using a content-based approach. Our current theme is animals, and this is segment 2 of episode 49. We're doing a comparison of 3 types of bears found in North America: black bears, grizzly bears, and polar bears. Let's start by getting a good look at this grizzly bear with its cub. Now, grizzly bears are also called brown bears. There's little for scale here, but a grizzly bear is larger than a black bear. Grizzly bears are also not nearly as populous as black bears, and their range is much more limited. The most obvious difference is the color. Grizzly bears also have a range of colors. Their coats are generally very dark, but the outer fur is light brown, which leads to their being called grizzly bears. What other differences do you see? Well, today we're going to use some simple features to contrast black bears and grizzly bears. We'll use their size and their most common color. Now, you may remember from our previous episodes that adjectives, words that describe things, can show comparison by either adding ER to the end or by using the word more before the adjective. Let's use that knowledge to form the comparative with the features we're contrasting. For the size, we could say that grizzly bears are larger than black bears. Adding R to the word large makes it a comparative. We added only an R because the word large ends in an E, so we don't add another E with the R. Grizzly bears are larger than black bears. Now let's look at the feature of color. We could say that a grizzly bear is lighter in color than a black bear. The word light does not end in an E, so we add both the E and the R to the end of that word to form the comparative. Notice that in both examples we use the word than to show that we're illustrating a difference. We're contrasting the same feature of different animals. So we again use the comparative adjective to contrast two similar animals. They're both bears, but black bears and grizzly bears are different species. By the way, grizzly bears are endangered because of their diminished habitat. Now, we have yet another species of bear. This white bear is called a polar bear. Now think of what a grizzly bear looks like and look carefully at this picture. The polar bear is distinct from the other bears in many important ways. The features we'll focus on are the size and the color. A polar bear is larger than a grizzly bear. So again, we use the word large, add an R to the end, and we have the word than that we're using as well. We could also use the word big. We have to add another G and then add ER, and that gives us the word bigger. Larger and bigger work well in this comparison. You could also use the word massive, but don't add an R to the end. You would say or write that a polar bear is more massive than a grizzly bear. Another notable difference is the color. The fur of polar bears is much lighter than a grizzly, that it's so much so that it's white. So we could say that the coat of a polar bear is much lighter than that of a grizzly bear. Again, we apply our rule to making an adjective a comparative by adding ER to the end of the word. Now, we've used the comparative form of adjective to show the difference between two similar animals. But what do you do when you want to go beyond a two-way comparison? Well, English has a way to do just that. It's called the superlative, and I'll show you right now how it works. Take the characteristic of size and apply it to all three species of bear. If you ever came face to snout with an adult black bear, you would agree that it was large. So let's look at this grizzly bear again for a few seconds. These bears are not so easy to find in nature. As I mentioned earlier, their population is smaller and they're not widely distributed. Explorers Lewis and Clark had never seen one until they traveled out west, and there were more then than there are now. Lewis and Clark were awed by the size of the first grizzly bear they saw, and our black bear would also be amazed, or at least intimidated. So it's safe to say that a grizzly bear is larger than a black bear, but that's nothing new if you've been watching this. Now, let's look at the third species of bear, the polar bear. It's huge. Thousands of people travel north to the town of Churchill on Hudson's Bay in Canada each year to see this huge polar bear, or these bears, not just one of them. So our collection of bears is just getting bigger and bigger. We've already established that an adult black bear is large and that a grizzly is larger. Out of all three, the polar bear is the largest. That's the superlative form of the adjective large. The superlative is formed by adding est to the end of an adjective. Since the word large ends in an e, we just add st, and now we have the superlative, largest. Now let's do the same with color. The grizzly bear is usually lighter in color than the black bear, as brown as a lighter color than black. But even the lighter grizzly bear find itself dark compared to the white polar bear. So out of the three bears, we say that the polar bear is the lightest. We just add est to the end of the adjective light to form the superlative lightest. Now here's the thing about superlatives. It can be used when comparing three or more things. So if you're comparing 7 animals for a similar trait, you would still use the superlative for the one that has the most of that trait. Now, if we were using the word massive instead of large or big, we would not use the word massivist. There is no such word, but we could say the most massive. So to review, when comparing two things to each other, we use the comparative by adding er to the end of the adjective. We can also use the word more before the adjective, which we must do with certain words. When the comparison involves 3 or more objects, we use the superlative by adding est to the end of the adjective. We can also use the word most before the adjective, which we must do with certain words. Now, I hope this is more clear than it was before. I sure hope you're not confused. I hope you're not more confused, or that your thoughts are not muddier than before. And I certainly hope this lesson is not the most confusing one you've ever had. If so, feel free to repeat the lesson and the whole episode for that matter. You can do that by going to my website, letscreate.org, and choose the episode 49 page from the Animals unit. This concludes segment 2 of episode 49. I'll be back with segment 3 right after this.
Organization that's doing big-time restoration of forests and stream banks. Hello, I'm John Letts, producer of Adventures in Education.
Welcome back to Ramping Up Your English, an educational support program for intermediate English learners of all ages and all language backgrounds. We use a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our theme is animals. Today we've been looking at the 3 types of bears that inhabit North America: black bears, grizzly bears, and polar bears. Now, both polar bears and grizzly bears are facing major challenges to their survival. Grizzly bears are seeing their habitat reduced while suffering some of the effects of climate change. Polar bears are suffering from the melting of sea ice at the North Pole, where the effects of climate change are more severe. One result that's observed is interbreeding with brown bears. Another is death from exhaustion, as polar bears swim in open water trying to find ice floes, the platform they use to find their main prey, seals. This shrinking habitat and crossbreeding could result in too few polar bears in the wild to sustain their populations. Now, while black bears are not facing such a future, they are subject to hunting and trapping by humans. Now, I haven't seen evidence that these practices result in more healthy populations, or that without it, black bears would be overpopulated. When it comes to trapping, there's an element of suffering that's present for bears and other animals. The state of Oregon, as well as the Pacific Northwest and some other regions, have a long history of trapping. Indeed, the Oregon flag has the image of a beaver on one side, a species that was trapped almost to extinction in the early Western days of Western expansion. Well, those days are long gone, but trapping continues to this day, including the trapping of bears. Cliff Baker of Trap Free Oregon appeared with host Lynn Bernhardt on an RVTV program entitled Animals Matter. In his mission to educate people on the reality of trapping, he demonstrated 4 of the 5 main types of animal traps.
Animal traps are the focus of this episode of a program called Animals Matter. Chris Baker of a group called Trap Free Oregon demonstrates 4 types of animal traps during this program sponsored by SOARS, Southern Oregon Animal Rights Society.
There's basically 5 different types of traps. There's a cage trap, which I do not have here. It's one of those live catch, have-a-heart trap things that they catch animals in. If they're doing it for fur trapping, they'll catch the animal, then they'll pull it out, and then they'll kill it, and then they sell it to the fur trade. So it's a little bit nicer. It doesn't cause the pain that some of these other traps do. I've also got here what's called a conibear bear trap, which is what they call an instant kill trap used for beaver and a lot of aquatic animals. I have a foothold trap over here, which I'm going to demonstrate as well, which actually closes on the animal's foot or leg. I have a snare, which is very, very commonly used for catching coyotes and other animals like the feral dogs, feral pigs, things like that. And then I have a dog-proof raccoon trap here as well. I'm going to demonstrate first what they call the conibear bear trap. This is one that they would set very often in the shallow water of a pond or a stream, because the animal that they're trying to catch goes in and out of the water in certain areas, and they can see where the animal is going to go in and out by this. It's a little slide. They'll set this thing up right by that slide, so when the animal slides down into the water, it gets caught in this trap. I'm going to come right down here in front. Now this one is mostly set. I've still got these safety catches on, which I am going to release now, so I'm going to be very careful, because trust me, this thing hurts when it gets on, if it catches you, and I've done it a couple times to myself. This one has an opening through here that the animal will swim through. They'll put some brush and stuff on both sides of it so that the animal has no choice but to go directly through it. They'll put it just under the surface of the water, maybe 2 or 3 inches under the surface of the water, and these are very, very big, very strong springs which are going to close this trap over the animal's neck. So the animal comes swimming through like this, and what they do is they touch this little trigger here, which sets the darn thing off, and there is absolutely no way that a human being can reset this trap with the strength of their own hands. You need to have a very special tool, which is made specifically for this, to compress these springs to reset this trap. If your dog is caught in this trap, because a lot of dogs like to play in the shallow water of streams and ponds, if your dog is caught in this trap and there's literally nothing you can do unless you happen to have one of these things with you. Basically, all people do is they lay down with their dog and wait for it to die, comforting it the whole time. All right, so that's what they call a conibear trap. This bad boy here is what's called a foothold trap, and this is probably the most common trap out there. This one is the one that you've seen, all your life for catching bear and stuff like that. These do not have teeth on them anymore. They have smooth jaws because it's considered more humane. All it does is close with an amazing amount of force and pressure on the animal's leg. What they do is they dig a small hole, they bury it, they put some pine needles and a little bit of dirt on top of it. They attach this to a tree or a rock or something or a log. Animal comes walking down the trail. Sometimes they'll put bait near it. Theoretically, they're not supposed to put it within 15 feet of something like this, but the animal will come along sniffing for this, and they'll put this right in the middle of the trail very often. The animal will come along and they'll step on it and wait for it, close on their leg. If a bird of prey like an eagle or a hawk gets caught in something like this, which happens way too frequently, these jaws will literally crush the leg bone in this animal, and there's no way for that animal to survive in the wild after that. So this one is actually quite easy to reset. So if your dog does get caught in this, you just step on those 2 jaws there, and this thing will open up and the dog can get out. Very often the dog will be traumatized but won't be seriously injured if you pull them out quickly out of something like this. This one is called a dog-proof raccoon trap. The nice thing about this is the very, very strong spring here. There's a little loop of wire that comes up here. The reason it's called dog-proof is because the dog can stick its nose in there or its paw in there all at once and push, and it's not going to go. What the trapper will do is they'll put a little piece of food on there's a little bar inside there, and the animal actually has to reach in, grab it, and pull it out, which is something a dog can't do. But a raccoon is very good at it. And then this spring goes like that, and it catches their paw inside there, and they are restrained until the trapper comes to get them. The 4th trap I brought is called a snare. This is a piece of stainless steel aircraft cable. I have no idea what the tensile strength of this is, but it's very, very, very strong. Very often, mostly what they'll do is they'll suspend this under the bottom wire of a barbed wire fence where it's obvious that animals are passing back and forth underneath there, and they'll put some brush or rocks on both sides. The animal will come along, get caught in that, they'll put their head through it, and as they go, it gets tighter and tighter, and it eventually will strangle them, or at least they'll be restrained until the trapper can get back. This type of trap catches all kinds of non-target animals. It catches dogs and cats and baby cows, baby deer, all kinds of animals that aren't intended, because this is really, really, really a non-selective type of trap. That's basically what I brought.
And that brings up the question of how many non-target species are actually caught in these traps. Can you address that?
Yeah, I can. Non-target animals are caught too often. Obviously, everyone would agree that if an animal that wasn't intended to get in the trap was caught, then that's too often right there. The problem is that most trappers, even though they are required to report non-target catches, most of them don't do it because all it does is create paperwork and potential questions, and there's no real reason for it. They're out there in the wilderness by themselves. Nobody sees it. If the animal is uninjured, they'll release it and let it go. If it's injured, what they often will do, there's actually an expression that trappers have coined for themselves, which we know about. They call it SSS, or shoot, shovel, and shut up. And so if the animal is injured, they don't think it can survive, they'll just kill it and bury it and be done with it. The only statistics we have come from former trappers who have seen the light and decided this is wrong, we don't want to do this anymore, and they have experience of years and years of trapping, and they come and they tell us that anywhere between 1 and 5 non-target animals are caught for every animal that they actually intended to catch.
Chris Baker says traps are used for 3 main reasons: selling animal pelts to the fur trade, eliminating predators, and removing nuisance animals. The group Trap Free Oregon lobbies for legislation to restrict trapping on public land. Chris Baker made his comments and demonstrated these traps during a program on RVTV Voices, a program entitled Animals Matter. I have a link to the archive of this program on my website, letscreate.org, and just find the episode 49 page under the Animals unit. You'll find a link there, and you can watch the entire program or even download it from that site. You can also do the same with this episode of Ramping Up Your English. Find the direct link to my website, letscreate.org, or go to archive.org/details/roguetv. Find Ramping Up Your English at the sidebar and enter it in the search box. You can also find all my programs under my name, John Letts. If you visit the letscreate.org website, you'll find a link to this and all episodes of Ramping Up Your English, as well as links to the video clips we used. You can watch Ramping Up Your English on Channel 15 in Ashland, the Ashland Home Network, and on Channel 182 on Charter Cable in Southern Oregon. Showtimes are 8 a.m. on Mondays and 7:30 p.m. on Thursdays. Channels and showtimes will vary in other areas. Contact your local access station to see the schedule in your area. I want to thank Gary Mark Roberts for his video work on the bear clips featured in today's program, and I'm grateful to Wildlife Images for allowing me to videotape their bears. I want to thank my director, Denise Ross, and all my talented and loyal crew, and I want to thank our viewers. All of you helped make this program an award winner. Join us next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roguetv. Join us next time on RVTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.